Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening. This is John with Murder by the Book. I'm the event coordinator at the store, and I am coming to you from my living room for another live virtual event. We're really excited to have Kyle Mills with us tonight. He is going to be talking about the newest Mitch Rapps book, Total Power, and we're really thrilled to have Jack Carr with us. He's going to be chatting with Kyle. Jack's newest book, Savage Son, came out in April. We were just talking before we got started that his book came out just as things were starting to close down and we didn't have our virtual events up and running yet. So we're really excited to be having him this way with us. I wanted to mention before I introduce the guys and before I forget, we have copies of both books in store. We also have signed book plates for Kyle's book, and we've got them for Jack's book as well. And when you order Total Power from Murder by the Book, you will get the exclusive Mitch Rapps holiday card that says the weather outside is frightful and happy holidays inside. So each of the events that got, or each of the stores that are doing events have a different card. So this is the one that we've got. So like I said, you will get one of those with every order. How are y'all doing tonight, gentlemen?
Good, great. Thanks for having us here.
Yeah. Our pleasure. So I'm going to get y'all introduced. So if you guys have just tuned in and you are not familiar with either of them, Kyle Mills is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of 19 political thrillers, including Red War for Vince Flynn and The Patriot Attack for Robert Ludlum. He initially found inspiration from his father, the former director of Interpol, and still draws on his contacts in the intelligence community to give his books such realism. Avid outdoor athletes, he and his wife have lived in Jackson Hole, Wyoming for over 20 years. You can visit his website, kylemills.com. And Jack Carr is a New York Times bestselling author and former Navy SEAL. He lives with his wife and 3 children in Park City, Utah. He's the author of The Terminalist, True Believer, and Savage Son. You can visit him at officialjackcarr.com or follow along on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, where he is Jack Carr USA. So I'm going to pop off, but before I do, if you guys are watching on Facebook, if you have questions for either of the authors, you can drop those in the comments. I will be chatting with you guys there. So I'm going to let the guys talk for a little bit, and then I will pop back later to relay any of those questions. So you guys have a good chat, and I will see you in just a little bit.
Awesome. Thanks. Thank you so much. All right, here we are. Kyle, what's happening, my friend? How are you?
I am well. It's kind of strange not to be in Houston right now. I'm normally, sitting in the store, but I'm kind of getting used to the new normal. How about you?
Yep, all is well here in Park City, but same thing. It's doing a lot of virtual events like this and connecting with people, but it's so great that we can actually still do this and still connect.
Here we are. Kyle, what's happening, my friend?
Oh, something's coming back at me.
Hold on. Yeah, me too, but it's gone.
Oh, that was me. Sorry, I forgot to mute my mic.
Okay, so we're good. So yeah, back at it. But yeah, I mean, imagine this happening 30 years ago, 35 years ago, 40 years ago. Your book would just end up being a couple, review here or review there in print, and that would be it. No way to connect with readers or engage or anything. So we are fortunate in that respect, I think.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because when I started, there was no internet, and so you'd get letters from people. That was your fan mail. They would send them to the publisher, and the publisher would bundle them up and send them off to you. And I remember back in the day that you'd get them if they were addressed in pencil. It meant they came from prison because they didn't give prisoners pens.
Interesting.
Big readers.
I might have. Yeah, I guess there's limited options. Yeah, one of those letters might have been for me because so Phoenix Rising was was what year? 90,
90, maybe 3, 94, 95.
Okay,
something like that.
That's where I first became aware of you because that cover was just so fantastic.
That was a good cover.
I mean, that back then for sure, and it still is today. Like that cover holds up. And for those that don't know, that's Kyle's first book, and I saw that because I've been a fan of the genre for so long. And so seeing that cover with a new author, and that cover just told you, hey, that it was a political thriller right away. And if you liked certain books, that you're probably gonna like this one. And I remember grabbing it and reading it and loving it. So I've been a fan for a long time. So this is always a great.
That is a long time.
Sit down and do this.
You were just a spring chicken back then.
I was. I think I was probably 17, maybe 18. But I distinctly remember the book and remember that cover, and I still have it in a box around here somewhere where somebody moves. It's in one of our boxes. So it's survived. It's a survivor. Yeah. So this is the 6th Mitch Rapps, Vince Flynn thriller that you've done.
Yep.
Amazing. Number 6.
Yeah.
And it's do I have this right? It's the 19th Mitch Rapp book. It would be the 20th Vince Flynn universe type book, but the 19th with Mitch Rapp as the protagonist. I think I'm right with those numbers. And before we go back to, I want to talk a little bit about your background for people that don't know and what brought you into writing. But right off the bat, can you tell us about the call that came in that when you first were offered the honor of carrying this character in this series forward? Did you get a heads up that something was coming from an agent or anything, or did it just come in out of the blue? Or can you take us through how you ended up where you are today, what that initial invitation looked like?
Yeah. So the first call was from my wife when she was listening to the radio at work and heard that Vince had died. And I'd known he'd been sick, but I was kind of a shock. And then you immediately, start thinking, well, what's going to happen to Mitch Rapp? The Last Man was the last book he wrote. It just sort of left Mitch hanging. And I thought, I hope somebody, they hire somebody to at least, I don't know, kill the guy or have him retire. There'd be some closure. I don't know, it's a month later or something. I got a call from my agent and they said they had contacted him and asked if I wanted to sort of throw my hat into the ring. Wow. So I thought about that because, it's kind of a big job. He had a lot of really rabid fans. I didn't know if they wanted it continued, if they'd shoot my porch light out, what would happen. So I kind of made a pitch and they were like, what would you do with this? And I'd read all the books, over the years. So I was pretty familiar with it. And I kind of threw him I threw him this pitch. I was like, this is probably what I do, but I'm not really sure. So, I probably won't. I'll change my mind. And I didn't.
That was your pitch?
Yeah, that was totally my pitch. I was like, this is kind of where I'd go, but you know how it is, you're writing a book, something looks good, on day one, looks terrible on the page, right? So I couldn't commit. And I thought, no, I'm never gonna, I won't get that job. And they, like a few days later, they called back and said, yeah, that sounds good, run with it.
No way.
So I did, and it was quite an interesting project.
No kidding. So that's summer of 2013 then, when that
yeah,
happened.
somewhere around
June. So summer, near the end of summer, you get that call and say yes and make that commitment. And then how did it start for you from there? So from that call saying, hey, you're the guy if you want it, and you say yes, then after you hang up that phone, what's your next move?
Well, there were a lot of false starts. I said, the first thing was I said, I can't do it in a year. I need like 18 months because I have to go back and read the whole series again. I'd read Transfer of Power 20 years ago or something. So they gave me the extra time. And then I said, well, have Lisa, anyway, Vince had written The Last Man, and then he'd written 3 pages of the next book, which was The Survivor, would become The Survivor. And I said, well, have Lisa send me over all the notes and stuff on that. And I write these really elaborate outlines for my books, and I would never start writing a book without this, elaborate outline and all the research done. And they said, what notes? And I said, go to his office, there'll be a box or, stuff, files on his computer, and send those to me. They're like, no, Vince just liked to sit down and go page 1 and start typing. I thought, I should have asked about that before I committed to this. Right. So that was it. I had these, it's not even 3 pages. It's really 2.5 pages to start. And then it was clear that it was going to arc over from the last book, the storyline, which Vince did a lot. So, but he'd killed the antagonist. So it made it really, really hard.
Interesting. Did those 3 pages, did that give you the foundation from which to go forward? Or did it morph and change those first, that kind of,
you would hope, but no, it was a recap of what had happened in the last book. So it was just it didn't help me know where he was going with this at all. And then with the dead antagonist, I was really struggled with that. And I actually created this thing where the antagonist had left these videos kind of goading him because he knew he was going to kill him. Like Rapp would finally track him down, but that his plan would continue. So you had this antagonist still in the book. Because, as you know, it's hard to write a thriller novel with no bad guy.
Yeah, it's an important important part of the formula. Interesting. Okay, so you did that. So then you created your outline that you're well known for doing. You create the outline for the Survivor, and then you go back, boom, get it out there, and people love it.
Yeah, it was great because even before, I thought I remember telling my wife, okay, I've signed on, they announced it. Now wait for the flood of hate mail. And I was really prepared for that. And I think I maybe got one hate email.
There's always one. Always.
There's always one. Yeah, there's always one, right? And like 1,000 people just saying how much they love this character, really personal stuff about how much it meant to them, how like Vince, they were dyslexic and it was these books that got them into reading, or they were reading it when their mother was dying in the hospital and they'd picked up this book and how much they remember it. It was just amazing. I mean, like it really brought a tear to your eye and really kept me going, through a lot of dark times, because Vince and I didn't have the same writing style, and it was a huge undertaking to write a book that fans wouldn't be able to tell from Vince's. I wanted to, under the adage, it's not broke, don't fix it. I wanted to give them a Vince Flynn thriller.
Right, and you did. I mean, I'm telling, and that's coming from a fan of Vince's, of course, and of yours, and you knocked it out of the park and have continued to do so ever since. And I know all the fans appreciate that, and it's it's just amazing. But aside from these novels, you have 14 others that started with Phoenix Rising. I think I got the number right. 14. So when you got that call, were you finishing one up? Were you between projects? Were you kind of at that stage where you'd have your outline and were partially through with another? Did you have to finish anything up before you dove in on the Survivor?
It was actually perfect timing for me. I had written, like you said, 10 of my 12, 11 of my own books, I think. And then I had just written 3 for Robert Ludlum. And that was all I was planning on doing for that series. So I was I've had this book that I've been working on for like 10 years and I have 10 pages. And something always comes up when I sit down to work on it. So seriously, I think I sat down and I was like, oh, here it is. This time, this book's going to get written. And I got like 5 days into it and they called. So, I was working on
10 pages then?
It's like, it's the most ridiculous thing. It's just, I know if I ever need a job, I should just sit down and start working on this book and somebody's going to call you. It'll be like a bike shop saying, somebody's going to offer me a job.
That's it.
So, so that got waylaid again, and I signed on for this one and thought, truth be told, I thought I'd do 3. It was a 3-book deal, but it's super fun. The fans have been great. It's a great story with a great character. So I signed on for another 3, and then I just signed on to do another 3.
That's what I heard, and that's great. All of us are excited about that. That's awesome. And then for those who might be new, I don't know if there is anyone out there that's new to you or the series or the genre even that's listening, but can you give us a little background on how you grew up and your dad and Interpol and how all that worked out? That's a fascinating way to grow up.
Yeah, it was super interesting. So my father was an FBI agent from pretty much the day I was born, and then he became the legal attaché to the United Kingdom, which is the FBI's representative in the UK and covers a bunch of Europe, and then became the director of Interpol. So it was a really amazing way to grow up. I was always around, FBI, CIA, MI6, Spec Ops guys. And so they were always the family friends, and great way to grow up as a kid, young boy, but they always were larger than life characters who had all these amazing stories. And I got to do all these amazing things with them all over the world even. And that kind of spoke to me when I started thinking I'd like to write a book. They say, write what you know. And I thought, I know all these guys, so I can call them if I get stuck. This is before the internet, and research was hard. So you had to call people on the phone and ask them questions. You couldn't
even text them. You couldn't even text.
Can't text, no Wikipedia. I mean, I remember once trying to find a poison for, it was for Rising Phoenix. And it was like a herbicide. And I finally had to use the 1-800 directory to call the company, and they gave me all the information on it. It was like, it was ridiculous. You had to like, hi, just need to know how this works. And if I take it, how long will I die? And then they're like, have you ingested this? No, it's not an emergency. So it's really, it was incredibly helpful because the first, I had all these DEA friends. And so that book was about drugs. And without them, I mean, I could have never written that book.
Interesting. That's amazing. And then when you're growing up around all these people and your dad's in the FBI and then Interpol and all this sort of thing, are you reading the genre? Are you reading back then Ludlums and Clancy's and Morells and DeMille's and all that as you're growing up? Do you have this love of reading back then and for the genre?
Yeah, all of them. I mean, from when I was a really, really young kid. I mean, I think I read, I don't know what, like Salem's Lot when I was 7 years old or something. I'd always had a love affair with reading, and for some reason there were no kids books in my house, and my dad was really into thrillers, so they were on the shelves, so I would just kind of pick them up. I don't think they realized it, but I would pick them up and read the whole thing, and didn't understand a lot of it, but I loved them. And then you went into Ludlum and Higgins and all these amazing thriller writers. So for me, it was always about the Soviet Union, when I was growing up, and it was super fun. Le Carre and all these guys, and then Clancy, who I really thought was just a cut above, was really interesting because I met him when he first started out, because he came to London because his second book, Patriot Games, was going to feature the legal attaché to the United Kingdom. So he came to interview my father, and we had dinner with him, but he wasn't famous then. He still had the insurance company. So I thought, wow, what a, my father called and said, we should have dinner with this guy. He doesn't know anybody in town. He's really quiet. And so we had him over, and then, later he became Tom Clancy.
Okay. So how old are you going out to dinner with Tom Clancy in London?
Probably my freshman year in college or something. But yeah, kind of fascinating. The guy was he was such an interesting character because he was so brilliant and he had so much stuff in his head. And then, he didn't want to get rid of the insurance company back then because he was thinking, this probably isn't going to work out, this writing thing.
Yeah, it's going to work out pretty well. Was he taking notes at dinner, or do you remember, or was he just?
Yeah, because so he had gone to my dad's office for a long time, which was sort of funny because my father had said, I don't know, he hadn't read the book. It might have even still been out on Naval Press back then.
Yeah.
He said, I haven't read this guy's book, but he's apparently some kind of author. He wants to interview me. So he came to the office, and
that's great. And did you guys stay in touch after that?
What's that?
Did you guys stay in touch with him after that?
My father and he became really, really close, and remained friends until Tom died. I mean, I remember calling up my parents' house, and he'd be staying with them for a week. For some reason, my father knows way more authors. And I'm not even aware of it. Like, I called once, and I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, oh, me and Freddie Forsyth are sitting by the pool drinking. Like, amazing. How do you know Frederick Forsyth? He's like, oh, he's here for the week. That's awesome. Doing research.
That's so great. I love that. Your dad should write one about all these characters that he's met over the years.
It's weird. Yeah, it's kind of weird. I was always fascinated with Freddie Forsyth because he was kind of involved in trying to take over a country in Africa.
Yeah, I just have the Outsider right over there on the shelf. I haven't read it yet. I read the first couple chapters, but I need to finish mine. Fourth one.
Yeah, well, that's
but it's right over there on the shelf. So about his life, and it is fascinating. Yeah, what a character that guy is.
I mean, I wish I was that interesting. Back when I was trying to foment a coup in Africa.
Exactly. Oh, I love it. So before I get into Total Power, which I read yesterday, but don't tell our editor, Emily Bessler, because I'm supposed to be finishing up book 4, but I read this yesterday.
That's right.
Amazing work. But before we get to that, so process-wise, and I'm asking these questions for a friend, do you have a certain day that you start every year so that you'll have an outline done by a certain time that'll allow you to then start that rough draft to get that to a point where you can then get it to our editor, or do you have something like that, or is it fairly rough, or is it regimented? And just curious how you plan out the year.
It kind of starts more or less. Hopefully, I think of ideas. So I come up with ideas while I'm in the editing process, and so Emily's hopefully she's not watching this. So I start the book when the editorial process is over. So if Emily has a lot to say, then it gets pushed out. If she's just likes it the way it is, then I have a ton more time. And then I've come up with an idea at that point. I start outlining, and that's the really unpredictable part of my life, is how long is it going to take to do the outline. Okay. I remember once I did, sometimes it can just be a torture. And I remember one Enemy of the State, I went for a long trail run in Tucson. It was like a 15-mile run or something. And I came back and I said, I did the whole book. I had it all like in my head, because there was in Tucson, you can't wear earphones because there's snakes and bees. Okay. So you're just out there and it's dead silent. And I thought, oh my God, I finished the entire book in my head. Nice. And so that was the easiest one I ever had. And then other times I'm just dying to try to get it done, because then I know how fast I can go after that, because one chapter a day, basically.
Got it. Yeah. So you get that outline done. It's fairly robust, and then you start the writing. So the outline for you is the majority of the time, or?
Yeah. Oh yeah. So my outline for this book to the next book, which they all always come in around 100,000 words, is 38,000 words long. Okay. So there's not that much left to do. Okay. All the research is done. It's just ready to go.
Yeah, that's a nice way to go. Yeah, I find mine are getting more robust, more detailed as I go along.
Your outlines are?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people just don't like it. like Brad. Right. So Brad Thor, he doesn't like it because he feels like it robs the urgency from his writing. But I couldn't. You'd end up with I don't know, if I did that, you'd end up with a book that just went all over the place, and you wouldn't be able to follow it.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating how different people, different authors do the outlines, or don't, or do partial, or however that works for them. But I'm always fascinating with everyone's different process. And so far, everyone that I've talked to has had a different way they go about it. So
yeah,
I love that.
I mean, do you edit your stuff as you're writing it? Because I have a friend that does that. He writes 2 pages a day, and they're perfect. I can't do that at all. You do?
Pretty good. I do. I know I'm not, like, a lot of people say don't do that, just get it done, but I can't help it. I have to go back and make it as good as I can get it before I can move on. So
really,
that's turning into about each chapter is about 2 to 3 days each, getting it out there at first, going back, refining it, and then going back one more time with fresh eyes, going through, adding, subtracting, moving things around, doing a little bit more research. If I didn't want to take the time to deep dive into something, I just put a couple X's in there. But that's kind of how it's shaping up.
But when you get to the end, you go, oh crap, I changed my mind about the middle or something.
No, so I still have the outline. I still have
okay.
I still have the guide. It just takes a little while to get through there, and the editing, they're not as robust, so it's probably more editing that's needed to get me to a place where I say, I can move on to that next chapter. I feel comfortable moving on to that next chapter. Because also as I'm writing, those other ideas start flowing, other characters come up, different traits come out. So a lot of that really comes out a lot of it comes out actually when I'm writing dialogue between people.
Yeah.
Really their personalities, their character traits really come out as I'm writing that dialogue, which I love. I love it all, the whole every part of the process. So it's some people don't like editing, but I love it. I love the whole thing.
My other problem is I throw away a lot. So my first drafts
are really that on your blog. Yeah, I saw that blog. You actually screenshot.
Yeah, I don't want to spend a lot of time polishing something that ends up in the garbage can. So that's another reason, just like as a time saver for me.
Interesting. That's a good way to, I'll have to dwell on that. But yeah, you have a great last couple of blogs have been about writing and on your website. And I encourage anybody that's a writer or an author or aspiring or established to go and look at that. And that really stood out to me when you took that picture of, here's what it is, and this is to show you that I really do edit it down, and here's what it ends up at. So that was really, really cool to show everyone. That was awesome.
I like economy of language. I've always been a fan.
I like it. And then do you use Scrivener, or are you in Word? How do you do that? Do you have anything? Just Word. I'm back to Word. I did my whole last one in Scrivener, which allows you to pull in research, drag and drop chapters, which I found very useful with my last book. So I outlined this 4th one in Scrivener, had research in there, had it all ready to go. But then when I started, I just kind of, for whatever reason, just transferred it all into Word immediately and kept going in Word. So
Oh, you
no
did?
explanation.
Yeah, I've had, like, I think you find your process. Particularly, like mine evolved probably for the first 5 books or something. And I had just all kinds of ridiculous stuff when I did at the beginning. I used to need to see my entire outline, like every chapter, what was going to happen in one place. So I'd cut them out and put them on the floor and stand on a table.
Nice.
And I don't do that anymore. But like it helped me find
Yeah.
like where I needed to be. And so Word has a really robust outlining program.
Ooh, I'm gonna look
So
into it.
yeah, so if you just click outline view, it does all the indentions and everything and colors it and all that. So I find that really helpful. And in the end, that was my process. But I used to do graphs of like where the action was and boring sections and all this stuff.
Interesting.
And it really kind of helped me nail down how I could write a book. And every time I try to get out of that, it doesn't work. So I try to book more like Vince. So there's a term that most people that aren't writers wouldn't know, but pantsing. So if you're pantsing, you're just like writing by the seat of your pants. And he did that really effectively. And I thought, well, to get into his head, I'm going to try that. And it was just garbage. I just had to go back and throw it all away. So
Oh no.
clearly that's a skill in and of itself.
Yeah, no, I find it very helpful also to see something visually. And I have a whiteboard over here where I have things written out, but then that gets too cluttered with like daily tasks, like take out the garbage and things like that. So that I do see it in Word, it's very helpful for me to see it and just visualize what's happening in each part, in each section, and how that's going to go. And for whatever reason, visually looking at that and seeing the whole thing really, really helps. So I understand why you'd stand on the table and look down at it.
Yeah, and then the time flow, every time people don't think about it, but every time you say, 4 days ago, I did such and such in your book, you think, was that 4 days ago? And you have to, count back and everything.
Oh, yeah.
So it's nice to have it all laid out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so when you say you get that idea when you're in that editing process from one book before you move on to the other, do you already have like a stack of ideas you're kind of sifting through? Like in the bullpen, they're ready to go. Like, if I can't think of anything, you know what? That one I thought of 2 years ago, I think it's time for that idea. I'm going to explore that a little bit. Let's check that out.
I do have a big file just stuffed full of like articles I've read that I thought there's something there. I'm not sure what it is or whatever. And sometimes stuff gets pulled out or combined or messed around with. But a lot of, it's kind of, as it's a little bit of a balancing act because you've got to stay current. So some of these ideas, they've probably been in there for 20 years and aren't relevant anymore. It's amazing if you think about like my body of work goes on forever, right? It goes back 20 odd years, how different the world was back then.
Oh,
I mean, when I wrote Rising Phoenix, it's funny, that's super popular book now, which I think is funny because, you have things like he's running for a cell phone. And like obvious things that he could Google, he doesn't know.
Yeah.
And it's about the drug trade, which was really big back then, the war on drugs and all that, which is much less so now, it just doesn't loom as large in society. Yeah. So kind of a yes and no there, but you've always got to be on that, to use the cliche, ripped from the headlines feel.
Right. No, I guess, and speaking of, it takes us in to Total Power. So is this one of the ones that the idea kind of came to you and then fermented a little bit during the editing process for the last novel, and then you dove in and started doing that research and then confirmed, yes, this one's going to be about Power Grid. I'm going down that path. Or how did this come about?
This one was a little different in that I had written a book years ago called Darkness Falls, and it was about environmental terrorists kind of attacking the oil supply. And at the end of it, my hero, saves the day. But I thought maybe that was a mistake, that this would have been a way cooler book if they hadn't. And I'd have started on the day that they didn't save the day and the world goes dark and all this stuff. And so that was always in the back of my head. I'd already done all this research on power and everything. And so when I was trying to decide a book, this idea came back to me. And I also like to throw a new challenge at Mitch all the time because he, like my other character, is always the guy that saves the day. And I thought, what if he didn't? What if it kind of starts with him failing? And then he has to pick up the pieces, and he has to pick up the pieces in an operating environment unlike anything anyone's ever dealt with in 100 years. And so that's kind of, those two things came together, that I wanted to explore what would happen if the power went out, and that I wanted to make Mitch deal with something he's never dealt with before.
Yeah, no, I loved it. And as I was reading it, as I was getting to the end and thinking about some questions to ask you, I thought, did your research or did anything you discovered as you wrote change anything about your personal level of preparedness? Do you all of a sudden have multiple generators with backups and solar and a well that runs off the solar and diesel and gas ready to go, extra food or anything like that? Or did you not make any changes at all?
I'm jealous of Mitch because, he's okay because he has this big bunker with solar and a well and all his big diesel generators and everything, and his farm animals. It does. It makes you really think about this, and you can't help thinking, would I survive? So the idea, people don't think about the grid and how vulnerable it is. It's really, very vulnerable. And what would happen if the power really went out all across the country? It's not like a little power outage in your area for 2 or 3 days. That's annoying. But the government estimates that if it stayed out for a year, up to 90% of Americans would die out. And when you see that number, you think, surely not. I mean, that seems really high. But then you think, how would I survive? And would I survive? I mean, if this really happened. And you kind of come to the conclusion that it would be difficult. I mean, I'm lucky. So a lot of it's like how capable you are. And I feel like I'm on the higher side of capable. I've spent most of my life in the back country of Wyoming. I'm pretty comfortable with all that. I'm healthy. You can't have anything wrong with you because, if you need insulin or something, you're done.
Yeah.
So, but it's mostly luck. I live in Wyoming where nobody lives here. I live next to a river you can drink out of. Animals that I can shoot walk through my backyard every day that are tasty. And there aren't that many people to compete with.
Yeah.
But I mean, if this happened when I was visiting New York, no way. I mean, you can't get out. The cars are clogged with streets that run out of gas. You can't drink. I'm not drinking out of that river. You've got millions of people competing. There's violence. I mean, the water goes out after a couple of weeks and then you're done.
Yeah.
So it's a fascinating thing to explore.
Yeah. I think people are a little more tuned into that after COVID and just the uncertainty of the last few months, starting really in February and then into March and certainly April, where they went to the grocery store and they weren't seeing the amount of food that there was normally there. And maybe some people lost jobs or had to figure out that financial foundation that they had or didn't have. And so I think people are a little more tuned in to what would happen if a situation like this did occur. And it doesn't have to be from a terrorist or a state actor or a super empowered individual. It could be something environmental that takes it out. I mean, society is very fragile, and I think that people are starting to realize that over the last this crazy year that we've had. So this book coming out now is very, very timely in many ways.
It's funny because people do. I feel it on a much more gut level, and I'd spent so much time trying to explain exactly what it would be like because people didn't have any experience in that, but now they do. So I'm already getting a lot of feedback that, wow, this is kind of, I really understand what could happen if it was like COVID, but much, much worse. What do you do when the grocery store is empty? So unfortunately, it's made the book a little more realistic to people, but I wish, it hadn't happened.
Oh yeah. No, it resonates more with people, I think, because now they have a personal touch point with it, whether it's their own experience or it's just hearing about someone else's or seeing someone else's on the news. It probably resonates a little deeper now than it would have a couple of years ago when we didn't have COVID and all the rest of it. Speaking of reviews and feedback, reviews, do you ever look at reviews like on Amazon or
not too much. The people send them to me. So if somebody sends them to me, then I would read them maybe. But overall, what I do is I do look at Amazon and make sure that the average is high, because I feel like if I didn't do well with the book, then the average would be lower than like Vince's books. So I do actually look at that. So many people have different opinions about books, but if there's a consensus opinion, then I do take that into account. Absolutely. I mean, like Red War is a Mitch Rapps book I wrote that I kind of colored a little bit outside the lines. It was about Russia. It was very geopolitical. I think some people said, it's kind of Tom Clancy meets Vince Flynn, which is probably accurate. But I don't think fans wanted me to go in that direction. I really liked the book.
I loved it.
Yeah, and some people loved it.
Yeah, British Columbia, actually. Yeah.
That's right. I remember seeing the picture. And it was funny because people would get mad about it, and then in the end they'd go, "But it was really good thriller." And what I took away from it was a really good thriller, but not necessarily a really good Mitch Rapps thriller.
Oh, interesting.
You know what I mean?
Didn't take that away at all. I loved it. Yeah. No, interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So so I learned something. I learned quite a bit from that, actually. And so I do pay attention to fan reaction.
Got it. Interesting. I know some people do and some people don't. Some people say they don't, but really do. And I was just curious how you.
I didn't when I wrote for myself.
Okay.
Like I have to say, I was really bad about that. I was like, this is something I'm interested in. By God,
yeah,
I'm going to write a good book about it, and you better like it. But with Vince, he has a fan base, and they deserve a book that they want.
Got it. Love it. Love it. And before, I have some fan questions that came in today that I want to make sure that I get to. But before I do, is there a hint of where you're taking Mitch next? And if you don't want to give a hint, do you know where he's going next?
Yeah, I'm halfway through the next book. So I'm really interested in the internal politics of the United States and just the kind of like sort of weird cold civil war that we've got going on between the right and the left, and how destructive that is. And I couldn't decide, with how polarized everything is, it's quite the third rail to touch on. And sometimes you think, I'm just going to pull back. I'm going to go back. I'm going to pull somebody out of Mitch's past, and they're going to come back, and there's going to be this battle, and there's going to be no politics at all. Or you can dive headfirst into the pool and hope there's some water in it. And I decided on the latter would be much more interesting. So I'm going to delve into, the politics of the United States and how that is to some extent a clear and present danger to the country. And we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. No, I love it. I kind of wrestle with that same thing, and it's hard for me not to incorporate those things in just because I'm inundated with it all the time. And it's at the kind of the forefront of what's going on in the country right now. We talk about being timely and we talk about those headlines. So I respect you diving into a pool like that. And I think readers do too. They respect people, or just in general, we as Americans especially respect people that take risks. Because you don't get anywhere without taking risks. So I think just as Americans, we love that. We love the underdog story, and we love that person who risks it all. And it resonates with us because either we've done it or we want to do it as Americans. So I think that's fantastic. I'm excited. Very cool.
Hopefully that'll be the case. I don't know. It's an interesting thing to do, but I think it's important. And I think honestly, I don't know if you wrote this book, like if you wrote your next book and politics was just everybody slapping each other on the back and smoking cigars, it'd start to feel like science fiction.
Exactly.
So you can't really do it.
Exactly. No, I agree. So I took a couple screenshots here of some fan questions. So Kristen would like to know, what is it like getting in Mitch Rapps' head? And when you're writing about Mitch, do you hear Vince Flynn's voice in your ear about what's going to happen next or where you should go next?
you know, being in Mitch's head can be fun and a little terrifying. He's, you know, it's fun to be the Superman. You gotta pretend that you're Mitch Rapp, but on the other hand, he's a pretty dark guy. So at the end of the day, you really have to shake him off, because it's always the threats and the evil and all this stuff. And you have to remember that most people are actually fundamentally good, and it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
As far as Vince goes, you know, he's not whispering in my ear so much as to what's going to happen in the book, but much more that I maintain his style. So, you know, when I start slipping into something I would do or creating a character that would be something that I would write, I definitely get that jab from him saying, I would not write a character like that, or I would never write a scene like this. So that's always in the forefront of my mind.
Oh, that's fascinating. That's amazing. This person, Drew, would like to let you know that he's buying a generator after reading the book. He already finished it. So.
I'm buying stock in generator companies. I keep
good. That's right. You should get some sort of relationship going with them. Get a percentage. Let's see. So this one is from Gregory, and he would like to know, do you ever see Mitch moving away from operating in the field and taking a different role in the series?
That'd be really interesting, you know, to move Mitch into more of a Stan Hurley kind of trainer, older position. But I will say that there doesn't seem to be much appetite with fans for that. So Vince actually aged, I think you and I talked about this, aged Mitch realistically, and I've stopped doing that because he'd be getting a little long in the tooth. So, you know, people seem to want to see Mitch kick ass and take names, you know. So I'm going to keep doing that until everybody wants him to stop.
I love it. I love it. And then Eric Bishop, of course, would like to know, what steps are both of you taking if an attack on our power grid succeeds?
I'm winging it. I know you're better prepared than me. I got the river, and I got the, you know, I can club a moose out back on my deck. I'm hoping that works out. If it's in the winter, I'm going to be really cold.
Yeah, I've been preparing my whole life for this, so this is nothing new for this plan here. Let's see, what else do we have? I think those are the ones that I have here from fans, but I know there are a couple others that are coming through on Facebook. The Murder by the Book side of the house.
Yep. All right. So before I get to the questions that have popped up, I just wanted to recap. If you guys have tuned in late, once we are done chatting, Facebook will archive the video, so you'll be able to watch it from the beginning. We'll also be uploading it to the store's YouTube channel in the next couple of days. So before we get into the crowd questions, Jack, you've been so great to chat with Kyle about his new book. Can you give us a little bit of an idea about the James Reese series?
I can. So the third one came out last April, kind of at the height of the uncertainty, and that was Savage Son, and made the New York Times list and everything. So that was very exciting. And now I'm putting the finishing touches on The Devil's Hand, my fourth one that comes out this April. But it follows a former Navy SEAL sniper, James Reese, who is now moved on from his role in the military. And in the first one, really thought that he was dying, which freed him up to do what he needed to do. And now that government is pulling him back in. And for this fourth one, I got to explore something that I've wanted to explore for a long time, which is, what have our enemies been learning from us, essentially watching us on the field for the last 20 years of war. So if you were either a state actor or a non-state actor and you're watching us in Iraq and Afghanistan, what lessons would you have taken and applied to your future battle plan? And then what would you have taken from this last few months of COVID and of these riots? And how would you have incorporated that into a future plan? So that's what I'm exploring here in this fourth novel that I'm super excited about.
Awesome. So Kyle, Bill asks, have you ever thought of writing a sequel to the Utopia Experiment?
No, not really. That would be kind of fun, but that was part of the Ludlum universe. So I've moved away from that, and maybe somebody else will, because hopefully that series will get going again.
Yeah, and if you guys are Ludlum fans, we did, Brian Freeman is writing in The World now, along with a guy named Joshua Hood, who's doing the Treadstone books, and we did a interview with them at some point in the last couple of months, and you can find that in the archived videos on our Facebook as well as YouTube. So Carol asks, are there any plans for the character Sonia in future books?
Yeah, well, yes and no. So I like that character a lot, and I kind of saw her and Scott Coleman getting together, but I haven't been able to get her into this new book as much as I tried. Significant others are kind of hard because people, whether it's it's a female op who has a husband back at home or vice versa, they become really difficult to always keep in the story. And I always thought that when Vince killed Anna, I noticed he blew her up. And I mean, it wasn't just he killed her, he was probably really done with her. He thought, how am I going to fit her into these stories? It's so hard. So I'm hoping, yes, at some point in the future, but there's going to have to be a good entree for it.
This is a question for both of you. How much do your editors change the story, and do you have any good stories about fighting to keep something in the books? Let's start with Jack.
All right. Yeah. So when I submitted my first novel to Simon & Schuster, I packed it up at the UPS store, mailed it off, and I thought that it would come back with all sorts of edits, and they would make it into something great. And so I wasn't worried. I'm like, it's going to Emily Bessler. I mean, she has the Vince Flynn and Kyle Mills and Brad Thor, and couldn't be in better hands. And it's going to come back with all sorts of red marks, and we're going to make this thing great. And it came back with next to nothing. It came back with 3 questions, and it was like, hey, would he really say this here? Would he do this here? And then a third one that I can't really remember right now. So it was not at all what I expected. So there hasn't been anything yet. Then we're on book 4, but there hasn't been anything yet that's been a major change. But all the small ones that add up are incredible. The way that she looks at it with her eye, and the little changes are actually, when I say little, they actually end up being huge and making the books what they are, for me anyway. But there hasn't been anything that I've said, no, this has to stay in, there's no way. And I always, from the beginning, I was like, if Emily Bessler wants to put aliens from outer space coming in, landing here, that's what's happening. That's what I'm going to do, because she's the best in the business. And that's kind of how I went. That's the attitude I took into it. And that's kind of so far how it's been. I haven't ended up taking anything out yet.
Yeah, it kind of depends on the editor. I've worked with like 12 over my career, and I've everything from, it was really easy to knock down, drag out fights. So it's kind of funny. I mean, I've really been at editors' throats before, and them at mine, over things. And sometimes they can be the dumbest, like, little things, or they just bother me because it's the way you see your universe. And I remember, for instance, Emily and I had kind of got into it over some injuries that Mitch Rapps had and how they changed what he looked like. And I had kind of changed what he looked like because he had all these injuries to his face. And she, because of the kind of the length of the series, having him change what he looked like just seemed like too much of a change to her. But in my head, that's the way the universe had progressed, and this is what he looked like now. So we kind of got into it, and she won on that one. So she wins probably 2/3 of the time. Right?
So kind of going along with that, is there, do you guys put any hidden jokes in your books that are maybe meant for just a few people?
I can take that one. Yes. there are a lot of things in there that might make sense to one person, some to 10 people, some to fans of maybe a certain series that I drew inspiration from that I want to kind of pay homage to with my with a tip of the hat. So I do work some things in there, and maybe some things that are just funny to me.
Yeah, for me, it's going back into Vince's universe and picking out just something obscure that happened to Mitch and making an offhand comment on it. And 10 people catch it or something, but it's really gratifying when they do, and they send you an email and they're like, I thought that was really funny because I remember that from Separation Power, whatever. And so I do like doing that. I actually almost threw in a mention of a character I had written in my own universe. And when Scott Coleman had been really badly injured and he was trying to. So Mike Nash was trying to replace him, and Mitch just kept shooting down everybody because he only wanted to work with Scott. And I had written this weird character named Fade, who was a former Navy SEAL, but he's a kind of a psychotic and practical joker and all this stuff. And
I know that guy.
yeah, and so you know, he's like, well, you know, what about his real name, Salam Al Hafayed? And he's like, what about him? And Mitch just thinks back to a time that they were doing an op in India, and Fade had taken this brand new BMW and like filled it with crushed purple velvet and put all these figurines and epoxied them to the dashboard and everything of Mitch's car. And he's like, I'd kill that guy in like 2 seconds. The 5th time he played that same Go-Go's record, I'd kill him. Nice. And so, but then I took it out. I decided not to do it. I chickened out. So you're more courageous than I am.
There are definitely some comments in the Facebook chat that people loved Fate. So he was definitely well loved and mentioned in the comments. I love that when authors do that, whether it's, you know, an allusion to like another series. The historical fiction author Tasha Alexander does that she has kind of vaguely mentioned Elizabeth Peters, Amelia Peabody, and like this character's cousin is a famous archaeologist. So like if you know who that is, it's this really fun inside joke. I love when authors do that.
It is fun. Yeah, it's fun to do too.
So Christopher asks, who wins in a fight versus Mitch Rapp and James Reese?
They're on the same team.
How old is Reese now?
That's right. I'm aging slowly. Like we talked about that a year or two ago. And I think that's where I've ended up, is where I'm going to age him slowly. I think that could change, but there's only 4 books in right now. So I'm kind of in that area I can still play around with. So I think aging slowly. So he's just shy of 40.
Okay. So not too much. Yeah, not too much younger than Mitch Rapp. I was going to say it sort of depends on when you get to Mitch, because it takes him a while to get going with all those injuries out of bed. You know, like I feel it's like me as the aging rock climber and backcountry skier and trail runner. I think, you know, by 10 I'm okay. Before that though, I'm limping around with ice bags.
Believe me, I get it.
And Kyle, you mentioned this briefly. Chris Miller asks, how do you plan, speaking of aging the characters, how do you plan to keep the longevity of the series while Mitch continues to age?
For me, he doesn't get older, he just gets wiser. So, you know, he accumulates injuries. So like in the new book that I'm writing now, he's trying to get back into, like, he's got a physical therapist trying to get back into triathlon a little bit. And bike racing because it's good for him, and trying to heal up all the injuries. So it's, you know, the old saying, you know, it's not the years, it's the mileage, and that's kind of my motto for Mitch.
I think that's one of the great things about, you know, fiction series like Robert B. Parker did it with Spencer. I mean, he would be, and Connelly does it with Bosch too. It's nice that you can kind of slow down the aging process, and, you know, people don't really worry. It's not necessarily because the book is a year later. That doesn't necessarily mean that the character is a year older. So several people have asked, Kyle, is there any news about whether or not there might be any more Mitch Rapp on screen, whether it's TV or movies?
Hopefully at some point, but Hollywood is to some extent ground to a bit of a COVID halt. Yeah. So there isn't a whole lot of new stuff going on or people thinking about filming right now. So fingers crossed that we'd get another feature or potentially something like a Netflix series, which would be, I think, kind of really cool because it's such a large and cool body of work. It'd be nice to see them use it all kind of from the beginning.
Yeah, I definitely want them doing something now. It'll all just be filmed on Zoom.
Yeah, exactly. It's like it'd be maybe a cartoon.
Yeah. So you guys both briefly mentioned this, but before we go out, do you guys each want to tell us? I know, you know, Kyle, your new book literally just came out, and Jack, yours is still fairly recent. You guys want to tell us what your next project or what your next releases are?
Sure, I'll start.
Jack, why don't you go first?
Yeah, so Kyle can finish it up. Yeah, working on that 4th book now, The Devil's Hand, and also working on scripts for the Amazon series with Chris Pratt. So that's on schedule. I think it's all classified about when they're starting to do things, but into early next year, mid next year, we'll be filming-ish, and then coming out after that sometime. So so it's really fascinating for me to be able to do that because it's new to me, and I'm learning a ton by helping and advising on these scripts. Just by doing that, I'm learning how to actually write them. So it's a fantastic team that they have on this project. So working on that, working on book 4, and then as soon as I put these finishing touches on book 4, it'll be immediately into book 5. And that's what the horizon looks like right now.
It's that constant treadmill, right?
It is.
How's the script writing going? I'm really interested in script writing because it's really funny. People probably don't know this, but it's like they tell you what has to happen on every page. It's like first plot point, page 9 or whatever. Is that interesting to work in that structure?
Oh, interesting. Yep. Because I haven't studied it before because I always wanted to write. So as I was reading books growing up, I wasn't writing them with the intent of becoming a screenwriter one day. So I never read books like that. Never read scripts. But it is fascinating. Beats you have to hit, things that you don't do because visually in a story, it doesn't resonate with someone watching, or it's off-putting, even if it's subliminal. So it's a whole different way to tell a story. And I'm just soaking it all in like a sponge right now.
Yeah, fun. That's super interesting. Yeah, no internal monologue, none of that stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly. Totally different deal, but fascinating in the same.
I'll bet. Yeah, so me, I'm about halfway through the next book. One interesting thing, we talked about it a little bit earlier, so I won't repeat that, but one kind of interesting thing is that you can't go on location anymore and scout. So I've had to dig back in all the places I've been and lived. So this next one, a bunch of it happens in Africa. I'd spent some time living in Africa. So it's an interesting setting that I can still do out of my head. But it's really disappointing. I don't like writing about places that I haven't been because you can look at a picture of them, which is better than it used to be, but you can't smell them and walk the streets and feel the heat or whatever. So that's been a bit of a challenge for me and a little disappointing because it's fun to set your books somewhere cool and get to go and hang out.
Awesome. So thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. Before we head out, a couple of housekeeping things. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, for all the great questions in the comments. As I mentioned, we have signed book plates from Jack Carr to go with our copies of Savage Son or any of his books. We've also got signed book plates from Kyle to go with copies of Total Power, as well as the Murder by the Book exclusive holiday card that says the weather outside is frightful. So when you place an order for us, you will get those. We've extended our hours a little bit. The store is now open for curbside pickup Mondays through Saturdays from 10 to 6. We're available for appointments on Fridays and Saturdays from 10 to 6. Of course, we're always available at murderbooks.com to place orders. If you guys have enjoyed this tonight, the best way to support the bookstore and these great authors is definitely to pick up one of their new books. We understand that book buying isn't in everybody's budget at the moment. If you still enjoyed the event, maybe you picked up the book elsewhere, we have dropped a link to our virtual tip jar in the comments. Buy us a cup of coffee. It's also a great way to support the store. But again, still the best way is to buy books from these great authors. Also wanted to send out a big thank you to the entire gang at Atria, but specifically David Brown, who is the publicist extraordinaire for both of these guys, Brett Thor. He takes such good care of us. We appreciate the work that he does so much, and we're able to do stuff like this because we've got him in our corner. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Again, I'm so sorry we're not able to do this in the store, but as we were saying beforehand, hopefully before long, we will actually get you guys to Houston and be able to see you in person.
Yeah, next year.
Definitely. Yeah.
Next year for sure. Kyle, thank you so much for doing this. Appreciate it. Always great to see you. John, thanks so much.
Good to see you.
And we'll see both you guys in person soon.
Yeah, take care.
And thanks for everybody that came.
Take care.